12. The Nightbeat starts right now.
First on the Nightbeat, a continued search for an 80-year-old man who crews say drowned at Calaveras Lake. Here's what we know right now. Rescue crews were called out just before 6 o'clock for reports that an elderly man went overboard near the CPS power plant dam. Bexar County deputies, San Antonio Fire Department, and game wardens are all handling this search. Now, we just got an update from BCSO 30 minutes ago saying one boat will continue routine patrols on the lake tonight, and then the full operation will start back up tomorrow morning. Right now, we don't know what the man's name is or what led up to him falling in the water, but make sure to stick with us on air and online for updates to this developing story.
Absolutely. That without a doubt, that gun should have been found at some point before the point that it was found.
Protocol in question. A 19-year-old suspect shot and killed himself inside the Bexar County Jail today. A little over an hour ago, we found out that team's name is Jesus Gonzalez. When we first reported this at 5:30, we told you KSAT does not typically report on suicides, but we found it important to explain why people in the area may have heard a gunshot coming from the jail today. It also raises public safety questions about how a gun made it into what's supposed to be a secure area. The night team's Daniela Ibarra poured through SAPD policy and found out police should have found the gun before the teen made it to jail.
A 19-year-old man walked into the Bexar County Jail this afternoon to be booked. 6 minutes later, he was dead.
It's pretty apparent to us that it appears to be a suicide.
Bexar County Sheriff Javier Salazar says emergency crews responded to the jail just after noon. He says the teen, now identified as Jesus Gonzalez, was charged with domestic violence choking, a felony.
By our policy, we strip search all inmates that are brought in on a felony.
He says Gonzalez pulled out a gun during the strip search and shot himself.
How did the gun get in there?
It's a secure facility. I mean, literally nobody is armed, not even us. So absolutely, the weapon should have been found before it got to that point.
San Antonio police say an officer arrested the teen this morning on a warrant and took him to the jail. SAPD policy shows officers are responsible for searching those they arrest for weapons, dangerous objects, contraband, or evidence. The policy says transporting officers are held accountable for any prisoners who get to a detention facility with any of those items.
Clearly, a weapon was missed.
We've requested to speak with Police Chief William McManus about this. Today, we emailed police asking if the arresting officer found any guns on the teen before bringing him to jail and if any action is being taken. So far, we haven't gotten any answers.
All we can assume at this point is that he came into the facility with the weapon hidden under several layers of clothing, but still, absolutely, the weapon should have been found before that.
The sheriff says the deputy who witnessed that shooting is being placed on administrative duty per mental health policy. He also says all the deputies that were in that section of the jail were unarmed and no one was hurt. In San Antonio, Daniela Ibarra, KSAT 12 News.
A group of bipartisan senators are once again releasing details on a package that would address the crisis at the southern border and provide foreign aid to Ukraine and Israel. If approved, it would give the federal government more power to restrict illegal migrant crossings at the southern border. It would cost $118 billion. $60 billion of that would be funneled into wartime aid for Ukraine and Israel. It does face an uphill battle, though, as House Speaker Mike Johnson has already announced the House will vote on a separate plan for aid to Israel this week. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas is pushing back on Governor Greg Abbott days after the governor criticized President Biden's lack of action when it comes to the southern border. Abbott recently expressed that he wished President Biden would use more executive authority to calm the crisis at the border. But on CNN this morning, Mayorkas pointed out Congress must pass legislation to reform the immigration system.
This coming from an individual who is purposefully refusing to coordinate, communicate, collaborate with other officials and trying to wreak havoc in other cities and states across the country. That is not a model of governance, and he couldn't be more wrong.
This is just the latest comment on what's been months of back and forth between the White House and Texas when it comes to the handling of the situation at the southern border. KSAT has led the way when it comes to reporting on news on the southern border. Just scan this QR code on your screen to stay up to date for more border coverage.
All right, let's head outside with live cam this Sunday night. It was a warmer than average into the weekend. We had more cloud cover in place this afternoon after finding some patchy fog this morning, as well as a little bit of mist. And something that you likely noticed if you did step outside today, a little bit more of a muggy feel. That humidity is pumping in and it's not going anywhere as we look ahead to the start of the upcoming work week. And so because of that, I do think as we sleep tonight, and especially by the time we're stepping out for the Monday morning drive, another round of that patchy morning fog, some of which could be dense in spots, will likely develop along with a little bit of drizzle before we start to see that dissipate by mid to late morning. It is still going to be a relatively cloudy Monday afternoon, and maybe a few isolated showers to a stray storm can't completely be ruled out throughout the second half of the day. After tomorrow, still unseasonably warm as we head into the week. 70s and 80s expected for those daytime highs. A few isolated rain chances can't be ruled out, though, later this week ahead of our next cold front. We're going to time it out and get you all those details coming up in just a bit.
Thank you so much, Mia. Well, firefighters and crews are still battling 3 massive fires in the Texas Panhandle. The largest, the Smokehouse Creek fire, has scorched more than 1 million acres of land. That's according to the Texas A&M Forest Service Incident Viewer. A red flag warning was in effect for today in the area because of low humidity, higher temperatures, and wind gusts up to 45 miles per hour. Aerial crews are also doing what they can to help, along with ground crews constructing fire lines to help stop the spread of those flames. House and Senate leaders released negotiated text of 6 appropriations bills Congress must pass by Friday to avoid a government shutdown. If the bill passes, Congress will have to vote on a second appropriations bill to fund the rest of the government. The deadline for that approval is March 22nd, and again, to avoid a government shutdown. Budget reductions in the bills include a 10% cut to the Environmental Protection Agency, a 7% cut to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, and a 6% cut to the FBI. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer urged Democrats to get behind the spending bills they say will only pass with bipartisanship. A senior U.S. official told the White House reporters that Israel has more or less accepted a ceasefire deal with Hamas. It would last about 6 weeks, and every single hostage would have to be returned to their families in Israel. More humanitarian aid would also flood the Gaza Strip if this ceasefire were to happen. Vice President Kamala Harris addressed the possibility of a ceasefire this afternoon during a speech in Alabama. She says Hamas claims they want a ceasefire, but now they must follow through their end of the deal.
Well, there is a deal on the table. And as we have said, Hamas needs to agree to that deal. Let's get a ceasefire. Let's reunite the hostages with their families. And let's provide immediate relief to the people of Gaza.
Harris is scheduled to meet with an Israeli war cabinet member tomorrow. The Supreme Court could decide tomorrow if Colorado has the ability to remove former President Donald Trump from its election ballots. The Colorado Supreme Court cited Trump's actions after the 2020 election as grounds to remove him from this year's ballot. The former president disagrees, and the Trump team has taken the motion all the way to the Supreme Court. Arguments were heard from both sides last month, and if that decision comes tomorrow, it'll be just in time for Super Tuesday elections in 16 states. Now, speaking of Super Tuesday, it could be a critical final test for Trump's last remaining Republican challenger, Nikki Haley. Haley got her first win tonight in Washington, D.C. primary, but the former president's lead might be too much to overcome. ABC's Mary Alice Parks in D.C. now with what's at stake for both candidates.
Donald Trump arguing he is unifying the Republican Party, but saying he is doing so by trying to kick some members out.
We're getting rid of the Romneys of the world. We want to get Romneys and those out.
The former president sweeping 2 more primary states, on track to dominate Super Tuesday just 2 days from now, but with no outreach to moderate Republicans who have yet to back him this cycle.
How many more times do we have to lose before we realize maybe Donald Trump is the problem?
Nikki Haley this weekend saying Trump needs her voters to win a general election. Without them, he'll lose. But the future of Haley's own campaign uncertain. With 15 states and a territory voting Tuesday, over a third of the total delegates up for grabs, she needs a major upset or two, or else any possible path to the nomination for her could be all but closed. During his rally, Trump focused mostly on the border, promising mass deportations, painting a grim, inaccurate picture of rampant crime and disease, broadly and falsely calling all undocumented immigrants criminals.
It's called migrant crime. These are tough people that come over, and they do. They come out of prisons, they come out of these institutions, and they're rough people.
In Arizona, a state her husband flipped red to blue 4 years ago, First Lady Jill Biden also out campaigning, talking mostly about reproductive rights.
Donald Trump is dangerous to women and to our families. We simply cannot let him win.
That was Mary Alice Parks reporting. And happening Super Tuesday locally, KSAT will have complete coverage of the elections and some early results for races here in San Antonio and the surrounding area. Join Myra Arthur and Steve Spriester for the KSAT Super Tuesday live stream Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. Coverage will be available on all of our streaming platforms. And it may seem like it's always campaign season, but when it's a presidential election year, there are a lot more moving parts. In this episode of KSAT Explains, we're answering what's a primary versus a caucus, a delegate versus an electoral vote, and if you vote Democrat or Republican now, does that mean anything later?
Often can they change the rules?
Too many times. They can change it as much as they want, right? And they have, right?
A new KSAT Explains on all things elections coming up in just about 20 minutes, so stay tuned. Coming up, a church here in San Antonio contributing to a worldwide effort to save lives. Their mission, next on the Nightbeat.
Want to spread the message that giving blood is giving life.
That was the message being spread at the World Mission Society Church of God this afternoon. The church hosting members, community leaders, and anyone who wanted to show up and give blood as part of the World Mission Society Worldwide Blood Drive. Churches in 175 countries all over the world participated in the blood drive at the same time today, all in an effort to save lives. All right, are you going on a trip soon? Some airlines are hiking up the price to check a bag when you fly. United Airlines will charge passengers $80 to check one bag for a round-trip flight starting later this month. And last week, American Airlines upped its luggage fees by $5. JetBlue and Alaska Airlines have also announced fee increases this year. Southwest does not charge for checking bags, and Delta does charge, but it has not increased its price since 2018. Well, the winter storm that dumped several feet of snow across some parts of California is coming to an end, with snowfall finally tapering off through the night. But ABC's Allison Cossack reports another round of moisture expected to hit the Pacific Northwest on Monday, affecting mostly the northern Sierra.
Residents of Truckee in California's Sierra Nevada took advantage of a slowdown in the snowfall and began digging out.
We are doing some snow displacement. It's not really snow removal because it doesn't get removed, it just kind of just puts it into the bank. So we just move it around.
Some residents are making the most of the winter wonderland.
Our dogs are having a blast, our neighbors are having fun, everybody's snowmobiling and skiing in the streets.
Winds are weakening, but more precipitation is in the forecast.
The next round is moving in tomorrow just in time for the work week. It's going to be highly concentrated over the northern portion of the Sierra into Oregon, Idaho, and Wyoming.
On Friday night, authorities say between 200 and 300 vehicles were stuck along Interstate 80 over Donner Summit.
We literally had to go one by one to start helping people out to get them off the hill.
More than 70 miles of that interstate remain closed. On Sunday, an avalanche on Highway 50 trapped multiple vehicles. Fortunately, there were no injuries. In the nation's heartland, 14 million people across at least a dozen states, from New Mexico to Minnesota, under red flag warnings. Wind gusts between 30 and 60 miles per hour and humidity as low as 7% could help fuel wildfires. The Smokehouse Creek fire, which started in Texas, has moved across the state line into Oklahoma. More than 1 million acres have already been burned, about 500 structures destroyed. The fire only 15% contained.
We're going to seek out some of those heats that are detected by the infrared flights, and we're going to be ready for additional flare-ups as they occur.
Meanwhile, some parts of the country will likely see unseasonably warm temperatures. On Monday, Buffalo, New York could break a record for March 4th. Allison Cossack, ABC News, New York.
Wow, a lot going on across the country. What we have,
kidding.
might not be that bad, I would say.
Considering how bad I guess it could be when you look at video from other parts of the U.S. Yeah, we had it pretty mild out there.
Fog,
this
though,
weekend.
it was foggy.
Yes, it was humid today, really. We did have a little bit of fog yesterday morning, and then again this morning with some mist out there. But yes, if you stepped outside, you likely noticed that muggy feel. We've got winds out of the southeast today. That's essentially been pumping in more of this Gulf moisture, raising those dew points. Right now, dew points in the 60s for many of us in that muggy category. That's actually about 5 to 10 degrees above where we were just 24 hours ago. And that humidity, again, it's not going anywhere. As we look ahead to our Monday, we'll catch a slight break as a little bit of drier air starts to punch in on Tuesday. But notice that doesn't last very long. More of that moisture moving in by the middle and second half of the work week before we see our next cold front work in just ahead of next weekend, which we'll talk about in just a bit. Here's another way to look at that patchy fog potential as we sleep tonight. And really, by the time we're stepping out first thing tomorrow morning, not a bad idea to give yourself a little bit of extra time. And just know we also could run into a few pockets of drizzle out there as well, with that humidity increasing just enough to get the windshield wipers going in spots. That's going to dissipate. At least the fog is by mid to late morning. Still going to be a mostly cloudy afternoon. And we also will be monitoring for a few isolated showers, maybe a stray downpour, and potentially even a stray thunderstorm. If we do see a thunderstorm, odds are currently low. It could potentially sit on the stronger side, something we'll continue to monitor for you over the next 24 hours. I do want to talk temperatures heading into your Monday. It is going to be a muggy start out there. Mid 60s, maybe even upper 60s the farther south that you go. That's it. That's all we're able to cool down to by 7 a.m. tomorrow. Again, the cloud cover sticking with us for the majority of the day, but despite that, another warmer than average afternoon is expected. 71 degrees at noon, the forecast temperature. And then I think high temperatures are still able to top off in the mid 70s for us here in San Antonio, potentially a few degrees warmer. Again, the farther south that you go, 78 in Pleasanton as well as Poteet, 74 for places like Bulverde and Bernie, 76 in Hondo, as well as Uvalde. If you think that's warm, though, check out Tuesday. So Tuesday is going to start off with a little bit of cloud cover, but then as we start to see some of that drier air work in, more sunshine returns into the afternoon, and high temperatures skyrocket. Mid to upper 80s expected. Tuesday right now looking like the warmest afternoon of the upcoming week. After we start to see a bit more cloud cover work back in Wednesday and Thursday, still warmer than the average, but temperatures more to the tune of the upper 70s and low 80s before we see that next cold front move in on Friday. And that does look to cool us down into the weekend. High temperatures back into the 60s with that drier air. It also does look to spark a few isolated chances for rain. Here's that setup. Low pressure system across the Pacific Northwest, the one we were just talking about. Temperatures below freezing for places like Casper, Wyoming, as well as Salt Lake City. That's going to work across the northern tier over the next couple of days, but it's this second area of low pressure moving across the desert southwest by Wednesday and Thursday that looks to drop that front through the region. We'll call it a 30% potential for a few isolated showers on Thursday, and then another 30% potential into Friday morning before that front pushes through, and then it turns windy into the upcoming weekend with that cooler and drier air taking over. Lows back in the 40s and 50s, highs in the comfortable 60s, just in time to spring those clocks forward by this time next week. Courtney.
Cannot believe it's already here.
I know. That went by pretty quick, I'd say.
I know, so fast. All right, thank you, Mia. We'll be right back with a preview of what's on Instant Replay. The San Antonio Spurs have 6 weeks left in the regular season, and they opened up the month of March with a home game with the Indiana Pacers. For a preview of what's on Instant Replay, let's head to Larry Ramirez.
And once again, Wemby was awesome. Double-double, 31 points, 12 rebounds. After a thrilling win versus OKC Thursday night, the Spurs were looking to keep it going against the Pacers. Coming up tonight on Instant Replay.
Spurs couldn't finish as Collins tried to push it back in. Wesley picks up the errant pass, though, and here he comes. Piece of flying. Oh, my goodness.
How about that finish by Blake Wesley? Fast break slam dunk off of a steal. None of the Pacers tried to slow him down. The Spurs came out hot tonight, and they go on to win their second game in a row. Highlights and Wemby poster on the way.
Make sure that I clean up all the mistakes that I need to in order to become the best player I can be. I'm trying to be an all-pro. I'm trying to be a legendary player in the NFL. I'm trying to leave my mark.
Wagner High School's very own Spencer Burford held a meet and greet at the Spurs game tonight. The UTSA alum and San Francisco 49er offensive lineman got to hang out and chat with the current Wagner varsity football team.
We're still just trying to learn as much as possible, trying to do everything or as much as possible that the coaches are asking for so that we can be fully prepared going into the first game of the season.
San Antonio FC midfielder Kevin Lambert is one of the many new faces on the squad this season. He's on loan from MLS side Real Salt Lake, and he brings a wealth of football experience to SAFC. He's 26 years old and is ready to mentor the younger players on the squad. And do you think the Dallas Cowboys should work out a deal to keep aging left tackle Tyron Smith or let him go via free agency? That's our poll question tonight. All that and much more coming up on Instant Replay.
It'll be weird to see him playing with anybody else.
It would be weird,
I
yes.
know. Well, we'll see. All right. Thank you, Larry. And we'll be back right after this. Early voting is over and all eyes are on Election Day this Tuesday. And in a presidential election year, there are a lot of moving parts. What's the difference at a caucus and a primary? Who gets to be a delegate and what do they actually do? Well, that's all in this week's KSAT Explains.
Republican and Democrat, caucus and primary, Iowa and New Hampshire.
Why is it so important?
Because it's the very first, and because it proves your organizational skills.
Since 1972, Iowa has held the first voting contest in presidential election years, a caucus.
Caucuses are kind of fascinating because it's a throwback to pre-modern America.
What's different about a caucus is that you actually have to show up. You have to be there at a meeting. And you have to hang around for a while. You can't just show up, vote, and leave.
I think Iowa has something like close to 3,000 precincts across the state. So imagine 3,000 different precinct meetings in which people are showing up, voicing their support for somebody. It is a highly intensive process to get people to participate.
A primary is the form of election that Texans and voters in the majority of states are used to.
A primary election is the voters' opportunity to vote for the candidates they would like their party to put on the ballot in November.
Voters show up, cast their ballot, and leave. The person who wins the vote in both the Republican and Democratic primaries will be on the ballot for the general election in November. That election decides who takes office. The rules of a primary election are laid out by individual states and the political parties within those states.
How often can they change the rules?
Too many times. They can change it as much as they want, right? And they have, right?
New Hampshire is usually the first state to hold a Democratic primary in the race for president.
New Hampshire, in fact, has on the books a law that says we're always going to be the first primary state.
But not in 2024.
President Biden did not want them to go first. And so the DNC passed something that said South Carolina is going to go first.
New Hampshire still followed its own law, though. The state held the first Democratic primary this year.
But they were stripped of all their delegates. So they have no delegates to go to the Democratic convention because they broke the Democratic Party rules by going ahead of a state that was tagged, in this case, South Carolina, to go first.
So what's a delegate?
You're representing your state at a national convention.
Who becomes the nominee is really based on the number of delegates.
Normally it's people who are well connected to the party, who have a lot of roots in the party, who have done a lot of work for a campaign, primarily for campaigns. It's a reward for some people.
Others become delegates because they're elected leaders within their party. Delegates carry out their duties at a convention. first at the state level, then at the national level. National conventions are those huge events full of pomp and circumstance where states carry their banners and delegates voice their support for the nominee their state chose in the primary. Then there's usually lots of balloons and confetti. But before we get there, voters need to go here.
Texas is a true open primary state.
We have a Democratic primary and a Republican primary.
You don't register to vote as a Republican or Democrat. What you do instead is you decide, am I going to vote in the Democratic or Republican primary? But you're not beholden to being a member of that party.
But if there is a runoff in a primary race, you have to vote within the same party in the runoff that you did in the primary.
So in other words, a person can't vote in the Republican primary and then vote in the Democratic primary runoff. So this is the DS200, also known as a ballot scanner or precinct counter.
There are a few different ways to vote in Texas. Guadalupe County, like Bexar County, uses a hybrid method that incorporates both a digital system and a paper ballot. You make your selections on a screen and get a printout.
It prints their ballot, and now they're ready to take it over to the DS200. Now, normally in an election, all of this would be sealed. You wouldn't be able to see all of this.
To cast your vote, Texas requires you to show a government-issued photo ID. That could be a driver's license, a passport, military ID, even a license to carry. Your voter registration card, though, you don't need that. What you cannot have out at the polls is your phone. It's considered a recording device. Also, no campaign materials, but you can take a sample ballot with you.
Sample ballots are wonderful. Sample ballots is a chance for a voter to prepare themselves for what they're going to see when they get to the polls. They can even mark them and bring them in already marked. Not everyone knows that, but it's totally legal.
There's also been some confusion about this too. These machines?
Let me explain that it doesn't connect to the internet. It does not connect to the internet legally.
It's not on somebody's Wi-Fi.
No Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth. It's not allowed legally to be connected to any of those things. And when I print election results election night, I actually print them. I trot them up to my office. I scan them into my computer to upload them to the internet.
Hayes says that goes for any election, primary or general.
And one thing we haven't talked about is also the Electoral College.
Oh yes, let's do that.
The Electoral College was a compromise that came about a long time ago to really make sure that small states still had a voice in the process.
So that the biggest states with the biggest populations don't determine every election.
This is not about whoever gets the most votes, right?
No matter the candidate that wins the popular vote, they still have to get 270 electoral votes. Texas has 40 electoral votes. Where's that number come from? It's the number of congressional districts in a state plus votes for each senator. In Texas, that's 38 plus 2.
Most states, winner take all.
It's winner take all.
Which means that whoever wins the general in Texas, they get all of our electoral votes.
But the majority of states, including the biggest in the U.S., like Texas, California, Florida, and New York, are solidly red or blue. That's why swing states are so critical to a campaign. They're the states that could swing either way, blue or red. There's just not that many of them these days.
This time around, folks from both sides, on the Republican and the Democratic side, say that it's 5 to maybe 7 states. So Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, maybe North Carolina are the only states that are going to matter. So that's not a good thing for the country, that most of the country doesn't really matter. I hate to say that, but that's the system we have. And if you're a campaign, you got to play the rules of what's in front of you.
Hope you took all of that in. If you didn't, you can head online. If you also want to check out a sample ballot for both the Democratic and Republican primaries, scan the QR code. It'll take you to our Vote 2024 page on KSAT.com. That's also where we have a list of voting locations and hours.
All right, switching gears and heading back outside with live cam, the cloud cover in place. Here in the Alamo City, temperatures gradually falling. We are still in the low 70s here, officially in town. Speaking of which, this afternoon, 78 degrees. That was our official high temperature, well above the average of 71, which we can see here as we take a look at the almanac data. It was a warmer than average day from start to finish, 63. Our official low temperature well above the average of 49. Our records 92 and 21, set back in 1901 and 1943 respectively. Not quite as warm of an afternoon earlier today compared to what we saw yesterday. Saturday, most of us got into the 80s because of that sunshine. Today, though, 70s was more the common theme. Still 80 degrees in Gonzales. It was 81 in Cotulla, 84 out west in Del Rio, 74 in Hondo, as well as Kerrville. Right now, temperatures struggling to fall in a few areas, especially here in San Antonio, pointing farther off to the southeast for more of that moisture in place. That will lead to some patchy fog tomorrow morning. We also have some rain chances isolated to talk about as we head into the week. We will talk about that, plus get you a look at how February wrapped up in the rainfall department coming up a little bit later on, Courtney.
Thank you, Mia. Well, coming up, a training program for communities of color to spot and accept treatment for mental health issues. Its leader tells us how this education can have a ripple effect that addresses historical trauma. A leader in our community wants you to know about a training program that's creating healing year-round. San Antonio was the first in the nation to finish all of this initial training. I talked to one woman who believes the focus on mental health in communities of color is strengthening the core of their culture.
What goes on in this house stays in this house.
That's the mantra Dr. Keely Petty is trying to dismantle in the BIPOC community, meaning Black, Indigenous people of color.
To include our Hispanic and Latina population, our Asian population, anybody other than our Caucasian family.
She's now the mental health training coordinator for the national health organization WestCare, which just got a $650,000 grant to create a training program for people of color in faith communities.
Do not demonize.
As a pastor herself, she knows it's common in BIPOC communities for people to go to faith leaders for help with things like mental illness.
I have to be able to do more than say, well, let me pray for you, go and be well.
The training is broken down into 3 sessions and subjects: mental health, psychological first aid, and crisis prevention, intervention, and verbal de-escalation.
You can be in any environment and someone can start verbally raging. It's where they use their mouth to do assaultive acts.
That de-escalation could be used with police officers or within the walls of your home. Education that historically was not offered to people of color.
Even if you go back to the beginning of psychology in this country, Black people of color weren't a part of that dynamic.
Rooted in isolation and racism is distrust of a medical system that once abused them. But Petty wants to break free of that.
We can use our voice, we can use our wisdom, and we can use trainings as this to strengthen our knowledge so that we can promote self-healing communities.
Courtney Friedman, KSAT 12 News.
The first training just finished, and Petty is gathering people for the next training group, which will start in April. If you're interested in participating, we have a link to the webpage in our story on KSAT.com.
Welcome back, everyone. All right, so we know that we've got a lot of fun things coming up. We just wrapped up rodeo, Fiesta is right around the corner, and also have to keep putting this on your radar because we are very excited here in the Weather Authority team, the total solar eclipse, which is happening on Monday, April 8th around 1:30 p.m. So here's your countdown for today. 36 days away, and your eclipse fun facts: traffic is likely going to be a little crazy with additional people, hundreds of people visiting the area because parts of Bexar County and of course the Hill Country are in that path of totality. So never park on the side of the road and watch for onlookers when we get to that weekend, and especially on Monday, April 8th. We'll of course continue to bring you the latest over the next 36 days. All right, until then, patchy fog and drizzle likely greeting us out the door first thing tomorrow morning. After that, yes, there is a chance for a few showers to a stray storm tomorrow afternoon and into the evening. The big story, though, moving forward is going to be unseasonably warm temperatures this week. Highs in the 70s and the 80s. And also we will be monitoring for a few more isolated rain chances, especially by Thursday and Friday. That's when we are expecting that next cold front to move move into south central Texas. So talking all about it again, starting off with that fog potential that is expected to develop in spots overnight tonight as we sleep. Not really dealing with any visibility issues closer to the San Antonio area, but you can see closer to the coast near Victoria, visibility is already down to just a quarter of a mile. So some of that fog is starting to develop as that humidity continues to work back into South Texas. So just know that will likely be the theme first thing tomorrow as you're stepping out for the morning drive. A muggy start in the mid 60s. Then as we start to see that fog dissipate, the cloud cover is expected to stick around into the afternoon. Temperatures in the low 70s at lunchtime, mid 70s for those daytime highs, and just a 20 to 30% potential for a few of those isolated showers to a stray downpour or storm before the day is done. Not a bad idea to keep the rain gear in the car should you briefly need to use it. Looking ahead to your Tuesday, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, the cloud cover is in store first thing in the morning, but then after we start to see a little bit more of that drier air move into the region, plenty of sunshine is going to take back over. But on the flip side of that, that's going to help temperatures crank up in a big way. Mid to upper 80s expected by Tuesday afternoon. Then as the cloud cover works back in Wednesday and into Thursday, temperatures not nearly as warm, but still unseasonably higher than the average. Upper 70s and low 80s expected. But I do want to once again talk about that potential for a little bit more rain as we head into Thursday and Friday. That low pressure system near the Pacific Northwest pushes across the northern tier in the coming days. Then it's the second low pressure system moving across the desert Southwest by Wednesday and into Thursday that's going to approach our area. That 30% potential ahead of the front on Thursday, then another 30% as we head into early Friday. Then we clear things out into the weekend. All right, we definitely could use the rain. We did see some decent rain in January, but February, we actually ended up below average by about 9/10 of an inch. So here's hoping we see a little bit more of a pattern change in the weeks ahead. Again, until then, warm this week, but then cooler as we head into next weekend, Courtney.
All right. Thank you so much, Mia. Well, theaters were counting on big new movie releases to boost the box office, and it came through. David Daniel has the early estimates for this weekend's top 5 films.
Get up. Get off. Get off.
Madam Web made $3.2 million, landing at number 5. Ordinary Angels dropped to 4th place, tallying up $3.85 million. The final 2 episodes of Season 4 of The Chosen debuted in 3rd place with $3.9 million in ticket sales.
We're jamming. The thing that jamming was a thing of the past.
Bob Marley One Love lost the top spot, but a 2nd place haul worth $7.4 million put the musical biopic at $83 million domestic.
Your blood comes from dukes and great houses.
As expected, Dune Part 2 dominated the box office in its opening weekend, making $81.5 million, easily the biggest debut of the year so far. In Hollywood, I'm David Daniel.
The San Antonio Spurs and Indiana Pacers met up for the second and final time this season when they faced off tonight. And we are now 3 weeks away from the San Antonio Sports All-Star basketball game. With more on all of that, here's Larry Ramirez.
And the action starts at noon, and it's going to be a busy day of high school basketball. Later this month, some of the best high school seniors will lace it up one more time. And you can watch the games on KSAT 12 coming up tonight on Instant Replay.
I come from a family of athletes, and to have this accomplishment is just something that I feel like I made them proud, and that means the world to me.
We are closing in on the San Antonio Sports All-Star basketball game, which is actually 4 games featuring 120 area high school seniors, boys and girls representing private schools all the way up to UIL Class 6A. Tonight, you'll meet players from Cole, Blanco, and the Young Men's Leadership Academy.
Just last month for Ohio State.
Clark, quick release. And James against Porter, drives, spins, gets inside. It's good. It's 40,000 for LeBron James.
NBA great LeBron James is now in his own club when it comes to the all-time points leader, reaching a new plateau last night. And in college basketball, Iowa guard Caitlin Clark topped Pistol Pete's all-time NCAA Division I scoring record. She's now the best of the best in D1 in men's and women's college basketball. All right, the Spurs beat the Pacers. SAFC is ready for the regular season. Plus, Central Catholic Boys High School Soccer is thinking state championship. All that and more in a matter of minutes on Instant Replay.
Yeah, they can't go anywhere. There's too much to miss.
Exactly.
All right, you heard it here. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.